All right. Okay. I think that we are live. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can see me, can hear me okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Leo Kamrat, a principal product manager in the Azure Arc platform group. Many of you know me as the person that is doing a lot of diagrams and publishing a lot of things around Azure Arc. And I thought of maybe doing something a bit different today. All the diagrams that you're seeing popping here and there, these are diagrams that it took a lot of time to develop, and a lot of people reached out to ask about how do we go by and create these type of diagrams, like what is the thought process, and how can I improve my skills when it comes to this type of diagram. So I just wanted to do something a bit different, just kind of try this live streaming and see if this is something that can that you can resonate with. So let me know in the comments. There are I see some people already in the chat, so thank you everyone for joining. So in this session we have 90 minutes. I'm not sure if we're going to take the entire time, but in this session what I wanted to do is to just kind of walk you through the thought process. What are the things that you need to take under consideration when you want to create these type of diagrams that I'm publishing? This style of glowing dark theme, and I'll share with you all the reasons behind why they look like this and what is the thought process. I do want to mention that this is my own opinion. You don't have to do things the way I do things. You don't have to just kind of think about that the same way. But I am putting some structure around that, and I do want to share with you some structure when it comes to how to create these architecture diagrams. So just a bit of background about me and how do I got to the point that I feel comfortable with doing this type of webinar. I've been in this industry for almost 20 years now, and did multiple roles, especially architecture roles. So I've been an architect, my entire life. I still consider myself as an architect, even though I moved many roles in my career. But architecture is the heart and soul of what I always do. No matter what are the things that I'm working on, no matter what are the things that I am trying to design, how a product should look like, how a training should look like, it's always, to me, boils down to how an architecture should look like. So that's really what I wanted to share with you today. And I think that just to kind of get going, let's just dive into the structure, and by the end of this live stream, I hope that you will get some tools on how to go by and thinking about creating these diagrams. What are the tools that you should use or consider, and where do you find all the sources of information? So I'll try to cover all of that. I also want to put a disclaimer: if you're watching this on your phone or your tablet, probably not the best idea. The reason for that is because when I'm architecting this diagram, I use a widescreen. I have a 38-inch widescreen that I always use to draw. That's really just kind of the easiest way for me to do things. So usually when I'm doing this type of session, I'm reducing the resolution to 1920 on 1080. But for this one, I decided to just keep things the way they are. So if you're watching this on your phone or a tablet, probably not the best idea. So I would highly recommend for you to watch it on your monitor. So let's just get to it. And I wanted to start with, and let's just kind of switch the screen here. If I'll know how to use StreamYard here. So I hope everyone can see that. Cool. So I wanted to start with just kind of provide some context. Every diagram should tell a story. No matter what you're trying to do, no matter how you are thinking about these type of things, every diagram should tell a story. You wanna capture the audience. You wanna make sure that people also understand what is it that you're trying to say via this diagram. Is it a technology diagram that you're doing? It is a flow diagram? Is it a product diagram? Are you trying to tell someone something via the diagram? So there are many things that you can consider, but the net of it is that every diagram should have a story. Every diagram should say something. And I think that, and don't worry, we're not going to have a lot of slides in the context of me showing you slides, and we are going to dive quick into the drawing piece of the stream. But you need to ask yourself a few questions when you're creating this type of stuff. You need to ask yourself, who is the target audience? Who is it that you're talking to? Is it an architect? Is it an administrator? Is an operator? A developer, a DevOps engineer? Every certain functionality or a persona in an organization is reading things differently. And that's why you need to ask yourself, the first question that you need to ask yourself is, who is the target audience? You also need to ask yourself, what is the flow of the diagram? What is the direction that I'm taking? Is it, a top to bottom? Is it bottom up? Is it left to right to left? What is the natural organic way for you to look at a diagram? How should the reader start with that? And I'm going to talk today about some of the techniques that you can use in order to illustrate the flow of the diagram and how should a person read that diagram. Is it, again, should they read this from top to bottom, or is it left to right? And you have the power to control the narrative. We'll talk about it more. And something that is, this is probably the hardest thing to do. Am I over-engineering this? For people with technical kind of orientation, we tend to think of things from an engineering standpoint. We tend to think of things, okay, so I need to put a lot of details into this diagram. That's not always the case. Most of the time, it's wrong, because when you're over-engineering a diagram, when you're making a diagram super busy, that can be hard to read. Now, some of the diagrams that I created can be considered, busy, but that's where you can compensate that with the storytelling aspect. And we'll talk about some animation techniques. How can how should you approach this and everything? Feel free to leave some comments, ask questions. I'm monitoring the chat, just going to make sure that, if there are any questions, I can pop those up and answer. And the last thing that you want to ask yourself is, what type of diagram am I creating? And to answer that question, I want to bring you to a concept that is, that is the conceptual, logical, physical concept. And this is something that has been following me almost my entire career. No matter what type of work I'm doing, what type of architecture I'm doing, I'm always asking myself the question, am I doing something that is conceptual right now? Am I doing something that is more logical? Am I diving into the weeds with physical diagram? And this is, probably the most important question that you need to ask, because this will set the tone for how you are actually about to approach the diagram that you're about to create. So I want to give credit to my good friend, Rebecca Fitzhugh. She and I, we've been working together for many years now. And she wrote a blog post on conceptual, logical, and physical. And I decided to take the illustration from her blog and just kind of manipulate it a bit to explain the concept of conceptual, logical, and physical, because this is a very important concept when you're approaching diagrams. So conceptual, if you don't know the difference, I think the best illustration to do that is via this type of flow. So if you're thinking about sports is conceptual. There is a concept called sports, right? Logical is, okay, so within a sport, we know that there is something called basketball, just as an example, right? But there's no specific here. We're not talking about specific player. But if you want to do, if you want to talk about the physical, this is where you're getting into the details. So this is the player, that's basically the nuance that we're trying to land. Now, let me take it for a second to the computer science world and just kind of try to connect the dots. When you're approaching a diagram, you want to think about, okay, so now I'm about to tell a story that is talking about a flow of a software development, and I'm gonna be very specific about this. I'm gonna talk about the protocols. I'm gonna talk about the concepts of the development that I'm about to land. But really, I want to dive into the weeds. That's going to be a physical diagram. That's going to be a diagram that will touch on the specific of the things that you're trying to land, right? But if I'll take it to the conceptual side of things, just kind of talking about it from the two side of the design here, Conceptual means that you are just trying to tease the audience. You're just trying to be like, okay, here's the concept that we're going to talk about. You don't have to be specific. You don't need to provide me with specific names of products. You don't need to do any of that because you're talking to me about the concept. Okay. A logical is something that is in between. Okay, so you're not being abstract like you are with the conceptual design, but you're also not diving too deep into the specific. So it's something in between. And sometimes it's hard to find the balance, and it takes a bit of time and practice to get to the point that, that you can actually feel comfortable about that. But I do want you to remember this: conceptual, logical, and physical is something that is relevant for every architecture, discussion, project, design, or a map that you're doing. So super important concept. All right. So during the, in the past few years, I created a lot of these diagrams that you might see me publish. So I just wanted to provide some examples to how those diagrams look like. And today, by the end of this live stream, I hope that you'll be able to get to a point that you can create those diagrams as well. Hopefully. So this is just one example. I would love to hear your thoughts. If this is a conceptual, is it logical, is it physical? Put those in the comments. Let's see what you think about that. But this is one example for a diagram. Another example for a diagram is a flow diagram, right? This is a diagram that is really tell a story in the sense of steps. Okay, and we'll talk about that in some techniques around how do you actually go by and do these type of steps. What is the right steps that you need to take into account when you're building these diagrams? So again, we'll talk about it. And also an architecture diagram. An architecture diagram that is designed to show connected areas within a technology, okay, or within a specific implementation, right? So what I will try to do in this webinar, I will not dive too deep into the actual technology, right? I mean, at the end, this is not the important piece. A diagram that is or an architecture diagram for a building, or an architecture diagram for, for a product, technology product, should have the same kind of state of mind baked into them. So I'm not going to touch specific on the technology. Obviously, you know that I'm in the space of Azure Arc, so I'm just going to use that as a pivot. But again, this can be relevant for for probably every type of diagrams. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is, why do I actually use dark theme? A lot of people are asking me why the dark theme. I like the the light theme or the white theme, and why do I use that? So just a quick story. About 20 years ago, I did a laser job. I was one of the first person in Israel back then that did this type of operation. And since then, my vision has been perfect. But the only thing that happened is that my eyes became super sensitive to bright light. So that includes the sun, and includes natural light or artificial light. And when I started using dark themes in my day-to-day, I noticed that it helps me a lot. So I wear sunglasses all the time. That's just kind of how I do things, and how I act on my day-to-day. And the dark theme really helps me. But again, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is just my truth. You don't have to take it the way I do things. And I'm going to show some example on white diagrams or light diagrams, just kind of give the other side of how to do things. So we'll talk about those techniques. So I think that with that was a good overview and a good beginning for our session. Again, feel free to put some questions in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat, so really keen to see everything that you have to say. Again, let's just try to have a conversation, even though you can't talk. I can see what you're saying. So let's just start. This session is really about trying to show you how to create diagrams that are the same as I showed you before. So this is going to be the pivot. This is a box, right? And this box has a bit of a 3D element to it. It has a glow around that. And this is what I use for all my diagrams. The reason that I use this type of box and the glow around that is because it's an eye candy. It really catches the eyes. And not everyone can relate to that. Some people will like to have it a bit more minimal. Some people will like to just be a bit more conservative when it comes to this type of stuff. But this is going to be the pivot. On the flip side, we also have the the white side of things or the light side of things. And again, as you can see, the white theme has a bit more a 3D element to it. In the dark theme, you don't see that much, but in the white theme, you do. So I'll show you how to create that as a, just kind of as a pivot for everything. And don't worry, I also have some, some links to share with you that you can grab that. You don't have to do it yourself, but once you create one template, you can understand how to manipulate that with different diagrams. But definitely, I'm going to share with you some sources on how, where should you download this type of stuff, or I don't have time to think about this. I just want to grab one box and just kind of iterate on that and create more and more boxes. So we'll talk about that. So with that, let's just get going. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to take one diagram that was published recently in the Azure Arc Tech Community blog. This diagram is a diagram that is trying to tell a story, trying to basically talk about Azure Arc enabled SQL managed instance with with Active Directory authentication. I don't want you to think too much about the details of the technology. That's not the point. The point here is to try to take this diagram and create something that is a bit more mature, I want to say, something that is a bit more professional in the sense of, okay, this is an architecture diagram, and this is how an architecture diagram should look like. Okay, so we're going to take this diagram that you see right here, and we're going to abuse that. When I'm saying abuse, we're going to create a net new diagram using the techniques that I'm going to show you to get to a point that you have a full-blown diagram that looks very much different than this one. So let's just get going. Let me grab some water here, and let's just let's just do this. I see some question. Akshay, I hope I'm pronouncing your name, so I hope I'm not butchering it. So apologies if I do. Yes, I will share with you some templates. I will share with you some links. But really, I want you to focus on the core teaching elements of this session. But yeah, definitely we're going to share some templates. So let's just get going. And at this point, we have a white blank. And as you can see, the first thing that you're noticing that I'm using PowerPoint. We'll talk about some techniques. We'll talk about tools and all that. But why am I using PowerPoint? I tried everything: Draw.io, Visio, free tools across the board. Why am I using PowerPoint? At the end of the day, when when I want to present something, when I want to share something in high resolution, PowerPoint to me is the best tool in terms of manipulating this in a very graphical way. So PowerPoint brings a lot of capabilities when it comes to manipulating shapes and and it's just, to me, it's much more user-friendly. I have nothing against Draw.io. I have nothing against Visio. You need to have the right tool for the right task. And for me, doing those type of diagrams, PowerPoint is the right way to go. So at this point, we're moving into edit mode. And what I always like to, say when you're starting this diagram, let's talk first of all about the concept of starting within and work your way out. When you're creating diagrams, you want to think about the smallest piece of the diagram. Okay, so I think that let's just get started. We'll create the diagram on the fly, and I'll talk to you about some of the concepts that you need to capture. So the first things first, we need to move into a dark theme. So to do that, just going to go to design, format background. You have the solid fill here. So I hope that this is not small for everyone. So I'll try to use some zoom it here to just kind of make sure that people following along. And we'll move into dark theme. And the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to remove the templatized text box. We don't need it. Okay, so I talked about the concept of working from within and just work your way out. You want to think about the smallest element of the diagram. And you can have multiple small elements in a diagram, but the notion here is that you need to think about what is my starting point? What is the anchor of the diagram? And like I said, there's no one truth to that, but as you will practice this, you will understand, okay, this is what I should tackle first, and this is what you should tackle after, and eventually everything will fall into place. So let's just get going. We're looking at this diagram right here, and to me, it's very obvious that this diagram is trying to tell a story, but my personal opinion is that I don't understand the story. I don't understand the pieces that I need to get out of this. Eventually, if this was designed to be a diagram that I need to learn from in terms of understanding how a technology works, to me, it's a bit hard. There's also some problems here with the icons. There are some problems here with the arrows. There are some problems here with the font, right? Multiple things. We'll talk about all these techniques. I'll try to cover that in this session. So let's just get going. First thing first, you need to assess, or it's not the first thing. We already talked about the first thing, which is work within and work your way out. The first thing that you need to, or the second thing that you need to think about is assess your space. You need to envision how a diagram would look like eventually. Like, is it going to be a big diagram? Is it going to be a busy diagram? Is it going to be like, are we going to shoot arrows from all over the place? Is it just going to be boxes? Is it just going to be squares? Like, so we need to think about this type of stuff when you are creating this. So for this diagram, I already kind of know that I want to expand it. I want to provide more details. I want to put a bit more meat around this bone, just kind of iterate on that. So I know that I'm planning to use the entire thing, okay? What if I want to, what if I don't want to use the entire thing? So what I can do is basically say, okay, I know that this diagram is just gonna be a bunch of boxes, so I can definitely do that. Here's one tip if you're not familiar with that. If you're taking elements from one diagram to another, you're basically not sharing automatically, you're not sharing the same formatting. Okay, so if I had a different diagram right here on the side and I would have copy paste from that diagram into this, you would see that potentially things were started to be a bit Scrabble, right? Because nothing will look the same. So what is it that you want to do? So obviously I'm using some shortcut, some keyboard shortcuts. Let's just copy that and to make sure that you're getting the same formatting, just right click and keep the same source formatting. Okay, that will give you the same element. Okay, obviously this deck that you see right here was created from the same thing, right? So if I'm just doing create Control V, you can see the difference here, right? So you can see that this one is Control K, which is keep the formatting. This is Control V, which is just pasting. So you can see the difference here. I hope that you can see the difference, that this is marked with an orange line, right, as a border. So you don't want that. Why is that? It's because the source of this diagram came from a deck that had that formatting, okay? So we just manipulated that, and this is really kind of how you want to do. Yeah, so Vitaly, I put a disclaimer that unfortunately I can't change the resolution right now because this is just kind of how I draw. So I will try to do my best and zoom in wherever I can, just kind of make sure that you can get the best experience out of this. So apologies for that, but I am using the widescreen to do this, and I highly recommend the widescreen if you're in the business of architecting diagrams. So again, Vitaly, apologies. I hope you will still enjoy this session, but just kind of bear with me here, okay? Okay, so like we mentioned, this is the first thing that we're thinking about. So this is the formatting. So let's go ahead and remove this, and you can see that we're starting, okay? So this is a box. Obviously, this is not going to be the first thing that I wanna talk about. Let's come back to the original diagram. Just kind of think about, okay, what is the smallest piece here? The smallest piece that we're seeing here is this box, right? We have this box right here. Let me try to do this one more time. We have this box here, right, that is trying to describe, in this case, a Kubernetes cluster, right? That's an icon for AKS. So here we go. You see the first kind of problem with this diagram. This is not representing what we want. We want to represent something that is a bit more generic, and this is supposed to be an Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster. So that's that's the wrong icon right here. So we need to fix that. We'll talk about icons more during the session. So this is the smallest piece that I want to fix. Now, within the smallest piece, we also have few elements, right? You can see that we have a bunch of icons, we have some steps, we have some arrows inside here. So these are things that we need to take care of. Okay, so let's come back to this. First thing first, let's talk about fonts. So I'm using Tentroid as my default font. You don't have to use Tentroid. It's really up to you. The reason that I like to use Tentroid for this, and let's just see where we're getting this. The reason that I like to use Tentroid for this type of diagram is that Tentroid is really a clean font in the sense that it's super easy to read. It's very accurate in terms of the lines that you're getting from the font. And you have multiple fonts like this, but this is just my favorite. As a good example to what not use, right? So if you will look at something like this, for example, let's just pick something. Obviously, not a good font, as you can imagine. And also, don't pick something that is like too dense. Okay, you're not trying to write a book here. You're not trying to be dramatic. You're trying to be accurate. You're trying to be clean when you're creating this type of diagram. So again, just want to provide that nuance of the font and get this out the way. Let's come back to Tentroid. When it comes to the size of the font, I would like to use just kind of start with 11 as the size and just kind of work my way. Depends on the size of the box, depends on what is the thing that we're trying to do. There are different fonts there are different sizes for different parts of the diagram. Okay, and we're going to see that. Okay, so let's just kind of go all the way to 11 here, and we'll just and I think that for just for the sake of this webinar, this looks a bit small, right? So I'm just going to zoom in and going to focus on this. Now, this is the font. Let's talk about how did I actually went by and created this this box. Okay, we talked about glowing. We talked about making an eye candy. How do you actually create this, and how do you pivot around that? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create just a very boring square here that looks pretty ugly, right? This is not something that I would like to put in the diagram. So let's see how we are. How can we create this? Or sorry, how to create this? Starting with that. Okay, so a quick tip here: if you'll pick a box, right? If you'll pick any element inside PowerPoint, and you go to Format Shaping. So the way to do this is just go here, okay, Shape Format, and then go into the Fill options, okay, or the effects, okay, and from that point you can start actually understand how an element, how a shape is being designed. Okay, so let's start to look at the differences here. So you can see here that in the shape, I have multiple things here, multiple categories that are not the default categories, right? And they're representing what we're seeing here. So if I'll do this, you can see that this is actually changing. So what we need to do is we need to copycat what we're seeing, okay, in order for us to get to the same point. So first thing first, look at the color that we have here, right? You can see that here I'm actually using, so let's try to zoom in here, right? So you can see here that I'm using this color, okay? This is what to give you the glow effect, the blue glow effect that you're seeing, okay? So let's just kind of work from there. So that's the first thing that we're going to change. So let's just do this, okay? So you can start seeing here that this is starting to, to pick up. Okay. Let's move fast here, and we'll go into the solid fill and try to imitate what we have. So we can see here transparency is 30%, size is 100%, blur is 30 points, right? And angle and distance, we'll keep those as default, okay? So let's try to do that. So we said 30%, right? So that's number one. And we also have 100% and 30 points here. So 100% and 30 points. Cool. All right. Now it's getting better, but we still have this, this blue color right here, not something that we want. So let's change that. I'll go into Shape Fill, okay? And basically what I'm going to do, you have two options. You can pick no fill, or you can pick the actual color that you want. In this case, it doesn't really matter because you're working on a dark theme and you're choosing the black color. So that's fine, not a problem there. And you can see that you're already starting to look almost the same. What is it that is missing? It's the shape outline that is missing. So you can see that I'm going into shape outline. What I want to do is we actually have two options here. You can go with no outline, which will make it look a bit cleaner, but it's also sometimes hard to identify the borders of the box. Okay, so you want to pick something that is complementing, and you want to pick something that is not too aggressive. Okay, so I always like to use this fine bluish thing, but which I don't know how to pronounce the name of this color. And I also like to keep down the weight, okay, of the color, right? I like to keep it minimal, as you can see here, okay? And so this is becoming, so it's starting to be a bit, looking the same, but not quite, okay? So if I'll go here into shape elements, if I'll click the box that you see right here, and if I'll click the format painter and just kind of click it, right, you can see that this actually changed. Okay, so let's look at the color. So you can see that this outline and this outline looks the same. So now we are at the same spot with the two boxes. Okay, so now we have a box that is the same. Okay, so this is your pivot. This is how you are creating this box. Okay, and towards the end of this webinar, I hope we'll have some time, I'll show you how to do this with the white theme. Okay, so this is your starting point. This is the box. Okay, all right. From that point, let's kind of walk our way through the diagram and see what we have. Okay, so I put some notes here, just kind of talk to you about techniques, making sure that I'm not forgetting anything. So we talked about font size, we talked about colors. So colors really, I'm not a big fan of using different colors in terms of the font. So you're not going to see me doing things like this because I feel that it's too much, right? You need to stop at one point. You need to keep the balance between and finding the sweet spot between it's too screamy and this is too minimal, right? So you're not going to see me doing that. And again, I'm just going to do format painter and just going to bring it back to white. Okay, so we talked about that. Now let's talk about spaces between shapes. Okay, and I think the best way to do this is to just kind of start to work on the diagram. Now, full disclosure, I already created this diagram. I have that on the other screen, and I'm just going to kind of copy what I did. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to talk to you about the elements here, okay? So what is it that I want to start with? I want to start with this box that I have right here, which is the Kubernetes box, right? The box that you see right here, okay? So we're going to start with that. Let's come back to our diagram. We don't need this, so we can clear the screen, and let's just think about what we should have inside that diagram. So we have few elements. We have a data controller, we have an AD connector, we have a SQL MI, Arc-enabled SQL MI resource, which is, by the way, also the wrong icon. So we need to fix that as well. And this is very important when you're creating these detail-oriented diagrams. Everything matters, right? You're trying to tell a story. So if someone is familiar with icons and all of a sudden you're putting an icon that is the wrong icon, then you're sending a mixed message. You don't want to do that. Again, remember the storytelling aspect of it. You want to be accurate with the story that you're telling. Icons are part of it. Okay, so we have few elements here. We also have the Azure Arc logo. We have the AKS logo. We're going to ignore them for now. So let's just start with the data controller and work our way. Okay, data controller. So with data controller, we have an icon and we have the font. So let's just start with the font first thing first. Okay, so we're gonna call it Azure Arc data controller. Okay, all right. So here's the first problem with what I did. The first problem is that you can see that this splitting into two lines. Okay, that doesn't look good. You know, you wanna try to be consistent about that in a more in a nicer way. Okay, so what is the problem here? Azure Arc, it's the first subject. Data controller is the second subject of this sentence. Okay, so a simple drop line will fix that. So now you have Azure Arc data controller. And let's talk about elements within a box. Align text to the top will give you the option to put an icon there without being disruptive. Okay, so we want to do that. When would I use up and when would I use bottom? Honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's really up to you. My style is to use up and not bottom in terms of the text alignment, because I feel that when you're looking at a box, right, you want to look first like you're reading a title. You're not reading a subtext. Okay, so that's why I like to use the top. And I also feel that this is starting to look right. Okay. I think this is the first kind of occurrence that we can talk about icon sources and where do you find these icons. So disclosure, if you're a Microsoft employee, reach out to me after. I'll show you some secret sources for this, but that you don't have to be. There are many sources for icons, and I just want to talk about a few of those that you can just find in a simple Google search. So let's just kind of talk about it. First thing first. Azure Arc Jumpstart. If you want to find some icons that I'm using and some of the elements that I'm using, you can go into the Azure Arc Jumpstart, and we actually started to put diagrams inside the Jumpstart that you can download. So that's the validated Azure hybrid diagram. So I'll click that. It will bring me into our Git repository, and all you need to do is just download this here, and you're gonna get a template with around 100 diagrams that looks something similar to what we're gonna do today. So you can definitely take that and start manipulating, and you don't have to create everything from scratch. You can use that, but you will find a lot of the icons that we're going to use today. You're going to find it there. Okay, so that's one source. So Kubernetes, if you're doing a lot of Kubernetes related diagrams, Kubernetes actually in their public Git repository, they actually have a community folder in that community folder, you will find a lot of the icons or all the icons that you need in order to use Kubernetes. PNGs and SVGs, honestly, it doesn't really matter what you're going to use. Personally, if I have the option to have SVG, I will take this, usually higher resolution, so I can manipulate with that, but it doesn't really matter. So you can see here that if you'll go to the Kubernetes and just kind of, again, it doesn't really matter. We're not talking about technology right now. We're talking about how to find things. So this is going to be, so every time, if you're not familiar with that, by the way, every time you're seeing these kind of checkers background, that means that it's a transparent background. And let's just show you a quick tip here. Let's try to see if this is going to work. If I'm just going to grab it here, well, this didn't work because of the background. But a lot of the time you'll be able to drag an icons directly from the website. You can drag it into your PowerPoint and you will get it. So that's pretty cool. So just wanted to make sure that you're familiar with that. So anyway, if you're doing Kubernetes related architecture diagrams, you can grab those from here. There is also a cool website that I found. It's called code.bench.io, icon collection, tons of stuff here. The official Azure icon set is pretty nice. There are a few things here. I will say that the Azure Architecture Center, it's an all right source, but unfortunately is not too up to date, which is something that, it's a shame. But it's not super up to date, but still there are many icons here that you can use. Just make sure that those are the updated icons as part of the diagram. So you can see here that it's been a while since this got updated. So I'm not fully recommended it, but it definitely has some things over there. So this is another source. And this gem right here by David Summers, I actually found it I think a week ago, something like that. David did a great job here. He put together these bundles of icons that you can actually go and download. So he explained a lot about the process and the design of the icons and all that. Really great job. And you can find all the sources, everything. So you know what? Let me just kind of do this here. Just kind of play with StreamYard here. We'll put this. I hope everyone can see that on the screen that I just popped that link here on the chat. So you should be able to see it. Now, what you can do is you can just download those bundles. Personally, what I did is I just look for the zip file, and there you go. And this is the package that you can download, and that package will hold many icons. Okay, so let's just kind of bring that here after I already extracted this, so you can see that here. Okay, so this is really all the icons that you can find inside that PNG. So really a great source of icons. So great job, David. I don't know if you're watching this or not, but great job, really, to put everything together. So we're going to use a lot of that. Now, very simple, by the way. If you're not familiar with that trick, you don't have to just kind of add something or whatnot. You can just grab and add. Right, so I just grab that icon, just kind of click that and move it into the diagram, so you don't have to work hard. Okay, so again, so this is covering the icon sources side of the house. So let's go from there. Okay, now what I'm going to do, let's finish with the data controller real quick here. And this is I'm going to bring the icon for data controller. Again, don't spend too much time on thinking, oh, how the hell am I bringing those icons? Like, where should I find those? We just covered that. And also, really, this session is about giving you the tools. Okay, it's about giving you the things that you need in order to go by and create this. All right. So we can see that we now have the first block. Okay, so this is Azure Arc Data Controller. To me, it feels a bit too big. Okay, it feels that there is a lot of real estate, and real estate is something that is very important. Remember, we talked about assessing your space. Okay, so this is really something that you want to take under consideration. Now, here's kind of the thing that you need to watch for. You also want to take under consideration the common element or the things that will look the same in various boxes. Okay, I'll explain. So right now we're creating Azure Data Controller. Remember what I just said. We're going to come back to that once I'll create another icon here or another box. Okay, so coming back to the original one, we also have AD connector, and we have this Arc enabled SQL managed instance. Okay, now AD connector. Let's talk about that. You know what? Actually, let's talk about the SQL managed instance first. So Control D will replicate this. If you will mark those two, you can see here that you have basically two elements inside the diagram, right? So you can see those elements, right? So you have the icon and you have the actual box, okay? How do you group those together so it will be easier for you to just kind of replicate that across the board? The shortcut key for this one is Control G, okay? That will group, G for grouping, and Control Shift G will ungroup, okay? So I'm using that a lot as I'm doing diagrams because I don't have time to do this, right? So see how much time it will take me to do this. So I'm clicking and then I need to go to group and then I can group. I don't like that, so I like to use keyboard shortcuts wherever I can. So just wanted you to remember that, okay? So we're gonna ungroup this for now and just gonna leave it that way. Now, Arc-enabled SQL managed instance. Okay, that's fine. To me, I like to be more accurate. Okay, so let's see. So I would call it Azure Arc enabled SQL managed instance. So now we have 3 lines. So that's a problem, right? And remember what I said about the size of the box and how you wanna tackle, how you wanna approach this. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, so first of all, let's talk about the differences here and how to be detail oriented with this type of stuff. So you can see Arc enabled SQL MI. What is the problem here? One, you don't have Azure before the Arc, so you're assuming that, okay, so this is, again, it's all about the accuracy. It's all about the detail orientation. So to me, I like to put Azure before because that kind of solidified it. It means that, okay, this is an Azure thing. And why it's important? It's important because here you have another element that is an Azure thing, right? It's part of Azure Arc Data Controller, but you also have AD connector, right? And that AD connector has actually an icon that is a Kubernetes icon. That's a pod icon. I don't know if that's the thing that we want to use. And we also have this, right? As a, I think I'm not sure. I think that's a CRD. I'm not sure. Okay, so you see the problem here, right? It's hard for me to understand or distinguish between, those elements. So let's come back to that. So Azure Arc enabled SQL managed instance, that's going to be the first thing. Now we have 2 options here. We can either do this, and again, coming back to the notion of dropping things, we can do that, or to keep the same size of the box and just kind of save our real estate, what I like to do is the following. So I'm clicking the box and then I'm going into shape format, and you can see that I have here the height and the width, right? Now, I mentioned before that this seems to me a bit too big, right? I mean, that takes a lot of space. So what I like to do is this, okay? And then I will start seeing what is the smallest I can go without cropping the text to 3 lines. Okay, so we can see here that as I'm playing with this is changing, right? So we'll do this, and now I'm going to use this as my source of truth, right? I'm going to use that to pivot. So we can see that we have 117 and we have 175 as the size, and that's what I'm going to replicate. So I'm going to go here. 175, 117, it's the same size, and now it's the same. Now, something very important to think about as you're doing this diagram is the spacing, is basically the how, what is the length between the two, or what is the distance between the two, depends how you're looking at this. So one thing that I want to talk about is spacing between shapes. Okay, that's another important concept. So if I'm doing this, you can see that as part of that, you can see those red lines. Let's just kind of zoom in here a bit. You can see those red lines that are basically telling me that this is sitting on the same kind of X inside the diagram, right? So that's the same line, right? If I'm moving, you can see that this is not there anymore. Now, why am I showing you this? This is just 2 boxes, but what if I have 3 boxes that I want to keep in a separate distance? Okay, so what I did is Control D. I just replicated the box, okay? And you can see here, let's just kind of zoom in. You can see 2 things are happening while I'm doing this. One, you can see again the red lines are popping, so that means that it's in the same X. And also you can see that arrow that is showing me the distance between the middle and the right box is the same distance, right? Sorry, if I'll do this, it's going to show me that it's the same distance between the left and the right and the middle. Sorry, between the middle and the left and the middle and the right, right? So you can see that it's the same. Okay, so I like to keep that very just kind of very tight, right? Very equal, because it makes it looks a lot cleaner. Okay, so just wanted to show you this. We'll throw this here. We're not going to use it for now, and let's just kind of move on with our diagram. So let's talk about icon accuracy here. You can see here that that I have another icon. I just pick it from another, and again, you have all these icons in the links that I'll share with you, and again in the description below. Following this webinar, you're going to have all the links, everything that you need. So talking about icons for a second, you can see here that I'm already using a different icon, right? And let's just kind of do this. So I'm going to use Snagit here because this is what I use for screen capturing. So I'll do this, and just gonna, not sure why Snagit is not working for me, but we're just gonna do that. And let me just kind of bring that here, and so we can talk about the accuracy. So you can see that this is not the same icon. You can see that, again, I'm trying to be more accurate as I'm doing this. And also this, right? This is a Kubernetes icon that you're seeing right here, right? And it's not the same icon, right? So very important for, again, detail orientation diagrams. Okay, let's shift gears. So this is one thing that I want you to take under consideration, and this is another technique that you wanna think about. What about sizes of icons? That's a question that I'm always kind of going back and forth around. Usually I like to keep it between 1.3 to 1.5, depends, right? If you go more than this, doesn't make a lot of sense. If you go lower than this, that's too small. So I like to keep it 1.3 to 1.5. 1.5, 1.4, it's kind of the sweet spot. It also save some real estate sometimes, depends on what you're trying to do. Now, talking about the real estate, you don't have the box, the boxes don't have to be the same size, okay? This is just the way I'm thinking about this, and just kind of from a symmetry point of view, but I just wanted to make sure that you understand this. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on. This icon is 1.4. Let's just keep it 1.4 and also align that. So you can see as I'm removing this is another important element, is the position of the icon inside the box, right? If you're not paying attention, you can just do this, but that's an unsymmetric way to do a box, right, with an icon. So I just want to make sure that you're following just kind of what PowerPoint is telling you, okay, which is this. Now, usually what I like to do is I like to remove another box that is standing in my way to just kind of make sure that the first one is okay. So we can see that we have this cross that is popping, right? So we'll try to get to there. There you go. So there you go. So you see that cross that is popping. I like to keep that cross. I like to make sure that the icon is in the middle of the box, but you don't have to. You can also just kind of do this, okay, and minimize the size of the box to play with that. So we'll do that. All right, just kind of keep it the same as we did. All right, let's move on. So we did the SQL MI. Now let's talk about the AD connector. So the AD connector is an interesting one because it kind of talks about a few things here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and we'll put everything just kind of into the right order, okay? But what I want to do here is I want to talk about the AD connector. So the AD connector, it's very hard to understand what's trying to say. Like, what is that AD connector, right? In the sense of the diagram. Sure, you have some text and that explain what it is, but if you want to show everything in the diagram, you want to put a bit more details into it. So in this case, this is an Active Directory, Kubernetes resource definition, right, or custom definition, or CRD. So I want to put that as part of the details that I'm adding in the diagram. Okay, so let's do that. Now, that's going to be a lot of text, so let's see how it turns out. So Active Directory. So again, instead of AD, let's just say Active Directory, because this is what it is. You can't count on the fact that people will understand the acronyms, okay? But you also want to find the sweet spot between how much details you're putting into this. So Active Directory, we'll call it Kubernetes, right? Resource, or Kubernetes custom resource definition, right? And this is going to be our text. Now, obviously, this is going to be big. And don't worry about the size that you're seeing right here, because I'm zooming in, zooming out. So I just want to make sure that we're working on the right thing. So this is too much, right? So I'm going to have to do something like that. Just kind of make it. And this is already bigger than this, which is fine. I mean, I can live with that. Now, CRD. So this CRD is a different icon. That's a Kubernetes icon that I can grab from the Kubernetes library. I have it right here, so I'm just going to grab it and do this. Now, sometimes when you will bring sources or icons or boxes from different places, you will get into something like this. So just gonna bring that to the back, and you can see that now you don't see the icon, but it's here, right? So quick tip, if you're encountering something like that, you can come here, bring forward, and bring to the front, and this will, this will pop again in front. So just want to make sure that you're familiar with that. All right. So let's continue. This icon seems to be a bit too big. We can go into 0.4 on this one. And again, I want to keep everything aligned. You can see that PowerPoint is telling me that the icons are also aligned. So that's great. Now, inside that, and this is just kind of based on the technology and my familiarity with the technology, there is something that is missing. Inside that AD connector, right, there is also another service, right? That's a DNS service, okay? And again, don't hold too much on the technology details and the product details. I just want to show you some elements here of how to design this type of stuff, okay? So I'm going to move this for a second, okay? And I'm going to create another box, right? So Control D, and we're going to change this to we'll say DNS proxy service. Okay, we want to be accurate. We want to make sure that we're providing details, because this diagram is already kind of going towards the direction of a physical diagram, right? It will basically be a diagram that is telling us, okay, here are the technology elements that are included in this product. Okay, so that's just kind of something that I want to emphasize. This is obviously it's big, right? So when you have a situation when you have a box inside a box, I would try to have the smaller box. I will try to have it with a smaller font. Okay, just gonna save some space. So we'll do this, and we're gonna put it right here. Okay, now this is already starting to look the way I want it to look, but I also like to put another icon here. So I already have a DNS icon here. Again, you can find all these icons in the folder that I gave you. So, in the links that I will provide. So you can see that here. But something that I want you to pay attention, this is, so let's just kind of zoom in here. You can see the distance between the icon, right, and the box. So let's do this again. You can see that there's no space here. So it's almost like the icon is kissing the box. That's not, that doesn't look good to me. So what I want to do is just going to use the arrow keys, just going to give it a bit of space, right? And I can also maybe make the box just a bit bigger. And you can see like those small tweaks are actually making things a lot more appealing, okay? Now we have this element right here. So let's just going to group this, okay? Control G, that's it. This is an element right now, and now it's grouped, and we can move on. So we created this, we created that. Let's talk about more elements that we have here. Let's talk about some arrows. Talk about what's the relationship here. Arrows plays an important piece, especially with flow diagrams, right? Because and almost every diagram that I'm creating will have some sort of arrow to just kind of tell the story. So in this case, what I want to say is that there is a relationship between the data controller and the SQL managed instance, okay? But before I'm moving on, so this is 0.5, this is 0.4, so I want to keep things the same order. So we'll fix that, and we'll get to the cross. That's great. I also think that we reduce the size of this, right? So, but I also want to keep it the same size of this box right here. So, okay, so we're good. That's great. So let's just make sure that the shape format is the same. So 175, 117, this one 117, 175. So that's good. All right. So let's group this, and let's group that data controller right here. And let's put this below that. Okay. Arrows. Let's talk about that and when to use what type of arrows. So arrows are pretty easy to understand, and you can see that PowerPoint is already telling you that you have those, connected or connecting dots that you can use just kind of for an ease. I like to use the white on the dark theme because it's natural, it's not overwhelming. I can also use this, but I think that this is too much glowing. I used to use that, but I kind of stopped doing that. So if you can, you can look at some of the arrows that I'm using here, different colors, just kind of talk about different flows inside the diagram. But I'll take you back to this one. You can see that here I was using this arrow. So let's just kind of copy that into the diagram that we are working on. And remember that, keep formatting. So pops here. So you can see that this is not the same. This is not the same color. So I like to use the white. I kind of changed my mind there, went back and forth as I was designing this diagram. So I'll keep it on the white. And as you can see, I'm diving deep into these details because I feel that these are the make or break moments in the diagram. It might sound tedious to some people, but these are really decisions that I'm thinking about as I'm creating these diagrams, which is why I want to share with you this. Okay, so we'll remove that. And I like to keep it at its default. You can play a bit with the size. I wouldn't recommend to go above 1 points or 1 point for an arrow, because otherwise it's starting to look too beefy. You don't want that. I like to keep it just kind of at the minimal. Maybe I'll go here to 3/3, 3/4 of a quarter, and then just kind of go with that. So what is the flow? What is the thing that I'm trying to say here? So there is a connection, there is relationship between the Azure Arc Data Controller, and as we are just kind of put some more text into the diagram, we'll start seeing more we'll start seeing how the logic is coming together. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind. We'll put it here on the side, and that's good. Now we also have again come back to the original diagram. You can see that we have a relationship here between the data controller, the AD connector, and the SQL MI. Remember, we also put like some more text around it, just kind of make it look a bit more, just kind of make it more sense out of this. Okay, so we'll put this here, and remember, everything needs to fit into a box, right? This is the Kubernetes box, or the Arc-enabled Kubernetes box. Okay, so everything needs to fit here. Okay, so I want you to remember that. Okay. So now we have another element, but we also we have few directions here that we need to take under consideration. The first thing that we want to do is, and this is a due diligence that you're going to have to do as you're creating these diagrams. You're going to have to think about, okay, what is the technology is telling me? What is the accuracy of the technology? What is how does one service talking to another? How does one element is addressing another element? Okay, so in this case, you can see here that we have like relationship, right? You can see that we have an arrow, but this arrow, right? If I'm looking at number 2 here, that's the step, right? If I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, deploy data controller, deploy AD connector, but there is no relationship between those two. Sure, a user needs to do that, but that's an implementation instruction, right? What I want to do is I want to provide implementation instruction, but also I want to provide an explanation on how an architecture should look like and how the product is working. Okay, so I just want you to take this under consideration. All right, it's getting hard in here. I hope everyone are enjoying this live stream. Just trying something new here. Let me know down in the comments. Let me know if this is working for you. If you want me to talk about some things as I go along with this. All right, we have about 30 minutes for this, so let's try to cover as much ground as possible. Okay, so we talked about the relationship. Now, when you have a relationship, when you have a service that is talking to another service, I always like to use a dotted line for that. Okay, why is that? Because it shows, or to me, it represents an internal process. Okay, so you can see that you have multiple types of lines here. Oh, let's do this again. And you can see that you have multiple types of errors, I want to say. The right arrow for the right task. Usually I don't like to use those rounded arrows. I think they are not symmetric and very hard to control. So I like to use the straight arrows that we have here. Now, I know that we have a relationship between the Kubernetes, the AD Kubernetes resource definition. By the way, if you want to take it one step further, you can also put the acronym, right? That will take some space. So it's really up to you. You can see here that I put an acronym. So I'm just going to keep it that way. You know what? Just going to keep it that way. And I'm going to group that DNS that I have right here. And first thing first, I'm going to have to ungroup. I'm just going to grab this box right here. And now I have a group inside the group. I'll move this here. And I'll move that CRD icon here. And now I have the box, and we'll group it again. So, okay, good. Now, I also know that I'm going to have an arrow shooting towards the DNS, towards the Kubernetes resource. So let's do that. I'm going to pick the double side arrow here, and it's just going to go from here to here. And you can see that that double side arrow is acting the way it should, which is just kind of pointing into the connecting dots. Okay. And remember, I'm going to change the size of it. Okay. And also I like to keep it the same size. So we can use the format painter and just, kind of click it, and that will make it look the same. But you can see that this, remember that, this is, or the origin of this is a straight arrow with one side arrow. Okay. So I did a format painter and kind of changed the way that I wanted this arrow to behave. I wanted a double side arrow. So we don't want that. So what you can do to fix that real quick is you can go here into the outline and just gonna do that and shape outline, and let's see what we're getting, arrows, and you can change it here, right? So again, so now this is a double side arrow, and like I said, this is an internal process that I'm looking at. So I like to use the dotted line. I like to use the fourth option here, or it's the third option of the dotted line, because the first one is a straight line. So I like to use that because it really you are able to see it, right? If I'll use this, let's just kind of change it for a second. If I'll use this, it's very hard to see, especially if I'm looking at this from an editing standpoint. Okay, so I don't like to use that. I like to use the third option for the dotted line. So we'll keep it like that. Now, we also have another relationship between the Arc data controller and the Active Directory Kubernetes custom resource definition. By the way, I think that I like to do it like this, right? So Active Directory Kubernetes custom resource definition, yeah, I think it looks okay. Now, like I said, we also have another element here, which is the relationship between this and this. So I'll do that, and I'm also going to do that because I know that this is talking to this one. And let's talk about some text that you can put. Again, don't focus too much on the technology and understanding the actual technology behind what I'm doing. This is more around the techniques, the things that you need to take under consideration. Okay, so a lot of the time I like to use text on top or at the bottom of an arrow to just kind of explain the relationship between two elements. Okay, so let's do that. What I like to do is I like to manipulate that. So I'm just going to copy that text, and I'm just going to paste it here in a free space. Obviously, this is not something that we can use because this is too big for a relationship text, like an arrow text. This is just too big. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the text here. And first thing first, let's kind of say what we want to. Let's kind of write what we want to say. So this is customer managed key tab, right? Deployment mode. All right, deployment mode. And I know that this is what I want to use. Now, obviously, this cannot go here, right? This is too big. So I'm going to go all the way to 9. I'm going to start with 9 and see where does that lead me. We'll move it here, and maybe we'll do this. And okay, now it's starting to look better. Now, I also want you to pay attention to something here as I'm doing this. Don't worry about this because, PowerPoint doesn't know what key tab really means, but that doesn't matter. Let's talk about positioning. You can see that I have the text here. This is aligned to the top, and this is something very small, but very easy fix. It's aligned to the top, and you're probably not noticing this, but because I'm replicating or duplicating those text boxes across the board, I like to keep things very aligned. I like to keep things very consistent. So I'm going to change it to middle here, and now I'm good with that. So you probably didn't notice the change, but this is something that you will notice with bigger text or texts with icons. So we're just kind of laying the ground. Okay, so now we have this. I also want you to pay attention to how PowerPoint is telling you that, or indicating the position of the text here. Okay, so you can see that as I'm moving this, PowerPoint is starting to telling me things. So this is where you want to be. This is like exactly where you want to be. And I'll just gonna do this. You see that right here? You see that right here? And that tells you that everything is kind of falling nicely into place in terms of the position. So I'm gonna do this. Now, This is not a must, but something that I like to add. This is more of a personal touch. But if you are laying down a concept or a relationship between two boxes, I always consider if there is an icon that can illustrate that. Icons are great eye candies. They are catching the audience. They are making sure that someone is looking where you want them to look. Text sometimes can be lost in translation. No pun intended. It can be. So what I like to do, I like to just kind of add a personal touch. So I have another icon here that I'm going to use. This is a nice icon that is showing me a manifest and a lock. So a lock is always in the context of security. Key tab, that's a security concept. So you see where I'm going with this. Just kind of make it look good. And you can see here that the icon, right, is falling in line. Let's just kind of see if we can zoom in here a bit. And the icon is falling in line with the text. Okay, so again, here's the icon, here's the distance here, and also here, if I'm doing this, let's just kind of try to nail it. Yeah, I can do it with zoom it, but pay close attention. As you can see, the middle line, right, the middle red line, the dotted line that PowerPoint is telling me this icon is centered to the text. Okay, so again, detail oriented. That's what I want to say. Another thing that you're probably not paying attention to, that again, this is all about the details here. You can see where the icon is falling. Now, let's see if you're paying attention here. What do you think is happening? So what is happening is that this is not at the same height of the box. Okay, so it makes it look a bit off. Okay, obviously I'm not drawing in a straight line, but trust me when I'm telling you here that this is not at the same height. There is a difference here. So you can either make the box bigger, we don't want to do that, or you can manipulate the size of the icon. Okay, so this is 0.3 because it's smaller. It talks about a relationship between two boxes, so that's why it's smaller. So you can play with that. You can basically do something like this. So if I'm just gonna go with my arrow, very just being sensitive about it. Now that icon is at the same, almost at the same line, even a bit below the lines of the boxes. Okay, so I really want you to pay attention to this. Okay, so this is symmetry. This is how symmetry looks like. This is how you create this type of relationship. Okay, all right, let's move on. We talked about the inner box. Sorry, we talked about the external box. This is the box that we're gonna work on right now. Actually, you know what? We forgot to put the text here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just copy that from diagram that I have here on the side. I'm just gonna do this. So you can see that I have DNS resolution internal usage via ADC DNS. Again, don't worry about the technology right now. This is not an ARC session. This is a diagrams session, okay? So you can see that I have another text, but this is not the same font because I used a different font in a different diagram. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna grab what I have here. I'll use the format painter right here and just gonna click that, and now sorry, we have the same font. Okay, so now we have this inner relationship all laid down. I'm just gonna do some tweaks here. You can see that I'm moving this around. Let's just zoom in here a bit, and you can see that as I'm moving this, PowerPoint will tell me where I stand. So this is where you want to be. You see that middle thing, right? That means that you're in the middle of this. Okay, so that's where you want to be. This is how you are putting a text on top or in the bottom of a text, of an arrow. Just gonna emphasize your point here, okay? Okay, now we have this box, we have this internal relationship. Let's talk about the outside box. That's the box that we want to have here. And also I want you to pay attention that this only saying communication. Now communication, I mean, that's a very abstract thing. Like what is it that I can do with that? Not a lot. I mean, what is that communication is all about? Again, it's not telling me the story that I wanna hear. Okay, so just wanted to make sure that that you're paying attention. Let me look some of the comments that you have here. Yeah, I see Kai. Hey Kai, nice to see you again. I see Sam. Hey Sam. Yeah, I hope that you're enjoying this. I hope this is useful. There's a lot of ground to cover. I hope that I'll be able to talk about all the elements and all the things that I want to lay down with you. I'm very much open to do another one of those in the future. Let's see how the demand goes. So All right, let me know in the comments. So this is the relationship that we want. Now let's talk about the box that is on the outside, right? So we have this box, the Kubernetes box. What I want to do is I want to create a box that will capture all of this. Okay, but I want to have that as a background. So what is it that we're going to do? We're going to copy one of the boxes that we have here, and we're going to remove the text for now. Okay, I'm removing the text, and now I have this box. It's covering that. So I'm gonna just kind of send it to the back. Okay, and now this box, you can see that it's in the back. So now what I can do, I can start manipulating that. We'll do this, okay? But before we'll do this, let's just gonna throw that on the side. It's gonna do that, and we're gonna group this entire thing, okay? So now as we're grouping this is all moving together, so that's great. And now we can come back to this. So remember, this box is representing a Kubernetes cluster, an Azure Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster, okay? So what are the things that you want to take under consideration? One, you want to consider the fact that you need to have a name for this box, and you also want to take under consideration the icon that you're going to use, okay? So let's do that. I think that if you will look at this diagram, and one way to position this, you can see that I'm moving the inner loop, like the inner boxes, right, to just kind of align with the outside box, okay? So you can see that cross popping. That's what you want to see. Now, if you will look at this diagram, right, if you look at this box that you have right here, you have a dead space. You have this, right? This is a dead space. This is a dead space, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because remember, we're still missing one thing. We're missing the name, and we're missing the icon of that box. We want to tell a story. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. But before we're going to do that, also look at this, right? You have some dead space here, you have some dead space here. You don't want that, because you're going to have more things coming in this slide or in this diagram. So you want to be conservative wherever you can, right? So let's take care of that. We're going to just kind of do that and do that. And also we can take it from the top, right? This is not important right now. And again, this is all subject to change as you are designing your diagram. And then let's align that back to the diagram so we can see it here. Okay, this is good. This is good. Okay, I think we're good. All right. So we talked about the dead space that we have here. Now, obviously, when you're doing a box, right, you have only just kind of multiple options to where to position the text if you're using the box itself or the text that is attached to the box. So I'll give you an example. You can see here that I have this Azure Arc SQL managed instance, right? So if I'll do this, I can play with bottom, middle, top, right? Or I can play with this. I can play with the positioning. But that's not what I want, because I want to make sure that I have a custom way to position the text. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to grab this this text that I have right here, and just going to use that as a template, and we'll call it Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes, right? You can also add cluster if you really want to, but I don't think it's super important. Now, you also want to make sure that this text is popping or is differentiated from the inner loop, okay? So the way to do this is by making it a bit bigger, okay? You can also use bold. I actually am not a fan of bold. I think that it's a bit disruptive. I don't like it that much, but to complete the picture here, just gonna grab the right icon, okay? So this is the Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes icon, okay? And to me, it's a bit too big for the size of this text. We're just gonna go to 0.4 here, I think. And also, I want you to pay attention to the alignments between the text and the icon, okay? You can go freeform without even paying attention. You're going to do this, okay? But that's not symmetry. Again, we're all about the symmetry here. So what you want to do is you want to do this, okay? You want to grab it and just kind of want to make sure that this is falling under the same line of the text, okay? Sometimes PowerPoint will tell you that you're in the right place, sometimes not. But another thing that you can do is you can grab this text outside, right? And just kind of make sure that you don't have any distortion coming from the other boxes, because PowerPoint is taking everything into account. Just kind of isolate that. And now you can see, just going to do that and go all the way. Now you can see that if I'm doing this, right, you can see that this is starting to be aligned, okay? And PowerPoint is telling you that it's aligned, okay? So pay close attention to this type of stuff. This is the detail orientation topics or elements or techniques that I want you to take under consideration. All right, let's group that, and just gonna go from there, and we'll take this as a whole and just gonna put it there. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? So we can see here that now we have a box that has a Kubernetes cluster, it has an inner loop, and everything looks, everything looks good. Now, if you want, and it really depends on the structure of the diagram. It depends on the elements of the diagram, but you can also play with the color. Okay, you can also play with the color here. So let me show you how it's that going to look. So this is the background, right? This is the outside box. If we'll go here to shape format again, it's also going to be in the home tab, I guess that's how you call it, of PowerPoint. You can play it a bit with the color here. So let's talk about colors here for a second. You can see that as I'm changing this, some colors are more complementing, some colors are more making a bit more distortion. You don't want that. So if I'm looking at the colors that are good match, I think that actually the grayish colors are making it look a bit better, right? So you can see now, if I'll choose, this light gray, you can see background 2, darker 90%. It will give you kind of the stats on that, on the data. Now it makes it a bit more, there is a difference between, you can see that the inside boxes that you have here and the box that is the background box. You can see the difference here. So I think that looks, that looks good. That looks very, very aligned. It looks like the point that I'm trying to make here. Okay. So just wanted to give you that element. So we talked about grouping, we talked about icon sources, sizes, and all this type of stuff. Let's see what else we can cover. One thing that I wanted to want you to pay attention is steps. Okay, we talked about the flow. We talked about how you are actually creating a story. Steps is a great way to do that. I'll show you an example, right? If you look at this diagram that I have right here, you can see that I put some steps, right? You can see, just kind of zoom in here, and you can see here 3A, 6, 5, right? And there are steps that I'm using. Why am I using these steps? These steps are important when you're trying to combine an architecture diagram and implementation diagram. We talked about it. Coming back to the original diagram that we have here, right? You have steps, right, which kind of trying to tell you a story about implementation, but the entire architecture is missing, right? It's really missing the bits and the bytes of the architecture. So these steps are a good kind of start, but they're not super accurate. They're not telling you what you want to do. So just kind of start with that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab another icon here. And I don't think we'll be able to complete the entire diagram end to end, but I don't think it really matters because I'm trying to lend with you some techniques here. So I group that, as you can see, and I'm going to ungroup this for a second. Just going to leave it like that so you can see all the elements are separate. Sorry about that. You can see that all the elements are separated. Things are aligned. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab another icon here, and I also want you to think about some things that not a lot of people are thinking about. This icon is an inclusive icon. Okay, it doesn't show any color, gender, nothing like that. It's a very neutral icon. So we want to look at icons that are neutral because you don't want to be opinionated in this type of diagrams. You want to keep it clean. You want to just be unopinionated with these diagrams. So this represent a function or represent a person in an organization. Remember, we talked about who is it that you're telling the story to? So here we're talking about, specifically, we'll start with an Azure administrator. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to, again, use this as a template, and we'll come back to the steps here in a second. So I'll grab this, and we'll change the text to Azure administrator. Okay. Admin is fine as well if you're feeling comfortable about that. I don't. I think administrator represented better. And I'm just going to do this. We don't need the entire thing. And I'm going to align the text to the icon. And just talk about steps here. Now, from here to here, we have multiple steps, but we're not going to cover all the steps. But here's what I want to cover with you. So I'm going to shoot an arrow from the Azure administrator into the Azure data controller. Now, sometimes those will not be aligned in the sense of, it's going to be at the same line of the data controller, or sorry, of the box of the data controller, right? This box. Sometimes it will be above it, sometimes it will be below that, depends on the diagram. So let's talk about a situation where it's not aligned, because when it's aligned, it's the easiest because you just shoot in a straight arrow. But when it's not aligned, you want to use an arrow that is, that it's a breaking arrow. So I'm just going to grab this guy right here, and we'll do that. Now, I don't like when I have this split in the middle. Let's first of all kind of change the color here and make it a bit. We'll make it a bit bigger. So we'll go with this. So I don't like this. So what you can do is you can move it. And the reason that I don't like this is because it's in the middle, right? It doesn't give me options because this is too small and this is too small. Like the space that I have here is small and the space that I have here is a bit small. So what I like to do is I always like to bring the arrow closer to where it starts from. Okay, so that's just kind of how I'm looking at this. Now, again, we're gonna grab this as a template, and we'll put this text right here, and we'll just kind of start with with the text that I have here, and we'll go from there. That's actually inaccurate because this is not true. The arrow needs to go actually to the Kubernetes box that we have right here. Okay, because this is kind of how to the data controller box. Yeah, so this is step number 2. Okay, so we're not starting with step number 1, we're starting with step number 2. It doesn't really matter. So let's just do this and bring this back here. And now you can see that I have this entire line to play with. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say that the Azure administrator is deploying data controller. Now, something very important, okay? You noticed here that I have the person or the persona in the organization, okay? That is right here, okay? But I always like to use it here as well because I want to emphasize who is doing the action, like who is initiating the step, okay? Because it's important for the storytelling. It's important for making sure that you're giving this fuzzy feeling when someone is reading the diagram. You want to make sure that they're not failing to read the diagram. So that's why it's important to me. Now, steps. To create a step, it's very simple. What I like to do is I like to use the circle for the step. So I always like to just you can play with that. You have the basic steps, you have the flow chart, doesn't really matter. But I like to do this. And if you don't know how to draw, that's fine. What you can do is you can just use the size and do something like that. So 0.3 and just kind of do 0.3. And now you have the right circle here. I don't like the color. I don't like this because I like colors that are making it look a bit more oriented towards the diagram. So colors that are more, that pops. Usually with steps, I don't like to use outline. I like to keep it without an outline. It makes it look a bit cleaner. And let's talk about the text within. If you'll start with just the text, right? And I'll double click the size, and I'm just going to do 3. To me, this is too big. And so I like to just it's also the wrong font. So let's change the font here to Tentroid, and we'll go all the way to 11 in this case. And I think we're good, making sure that the text is aligned to the middle, as you can see. And now we're good. Now, white on this green, maybe not the best color, so you can play with that. So to me, it's either white or black for this type of stuff. But you can see that this is now starting to look better. So this is going to be step number 2. And why is it important? It's important to keep in mind those steps as you are building more complex diagrams, as you are trying to land the story around implementation flow, as you're trying to just make sure that architecture and implementation are coming together. Remember, this is like becoming a more of a physical diagram. It has more details, protocols, stuff like that. So it's leaning towards the physical diagram. So steps is appropriate. There's no problem with that. And again, this is really your truth here. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand it. Now, let's talk about animation for a second, and then just going to wrap up this webinar. We covered a lot of ground, and there's a lot of things to take under consideration. So let me know in the comments down below and in the chat if you feel that this is something that you want me to do more of those and talk about more advanced techniques as we are continuing creating this. But what I want to do is I want to create a fictional step here. And I'm just going to shoot an arrow from here. Just going to shoot an arrow from here. And we're just going to take this and we'll take this and we're going to duplicate those two. And we'll call it, this is not really a step. Okay. And we'll change this to, let's just say number 1. Okay. Oh, we'll change this to number 1 and we'll change, do this. And we'll change this to number 3 just for fun. And we'll do this. Now let's talk about animations. Animations are a great way to tell your story. Okay, so if you want to emphasize the steps and you don't want everything to be, or you are presenting your architecture instead of just sharing your architecture, animations is a great way. I just want to show you a quick tip around animations. Usually I like to use the fade animation for this type of stuff. So if I'll just kind of do this, I'll select the arrow, I'll select the number, the step, and I'll select the text. Okay, and I'm just going to group those together. So go here to animation, right here under animation, like this, and I'll click the fade. Okay, so now we have this animation, which is great. What I like to do, if I'll open the animation pane, and you know what, let's create another animation so we'll have something to compare. I'll do the same here and we'll do fade. What I like to do with animations is I like to, you know what, let's group those together, keep it consistent. All right, cool. And this is going to be another animation. All right, great. So now you can see that I have 2 animations here. What I like to do with these animations, usually I don't like the, let me just kind of zoom in here. I hope you'll be able to see it. So I like to just kind of mark all the animations, and in the timing, I like to change it to 0.3. 0.5 to me is too slow, I want to say, for this type of animation. And I know this sounds like, you know, very picky, but trust me, those things matters. So that's just kind of how I like to look at this. And if I'll do this, right, and you can see that the steps are telling the story. So animations are a really nice way to just kind of talk about it. Well, there's a lot of concepts that that I wish I was able to cover, but I think we covered a lot of ground here. Here's one last quick tip: when you're creating this diagram and you want to share those not as PowerPoint files, but you want to share those as high-resolution files. So let me show you a quick tip. If you'll, you know, let's just Google this for a second. So PowerPoint export high resolution. It'll get you into a Microsoft doc that will show you how to change a registry edit. So by default, when you're exporting those diagrams, it will be with high DPI, so high resolution. And these are basically the registry keys that you need to change in order to get there. So once you change those, and you will go into PowerPoint, and let's just open this, and then go here into export. And sorry, not export, you will go to save. So not here, sorry about that. And you'll go save a copy, and you want to export this into a high resolution file. You'll be able to do this because you changed the element. So what you want to do is you want to pick this, but also do the browse thing, or just click more options, okay, or change the type of the file to JPEG or PNG. I prefer JPEG when I'm exporting this, but basically here, what you want to do is you want to change to JPEG, and this will automatically save it with high resolution. Okay, so just something to take under consideration. So with that, I hope that that live stream was helpful. There is a lot of ground to cover. There's a lot of elements. There's a lot of small things that you can do in order to, make a great diagram into an awesome diagram. And I hope I was able to cover some of those things we talked about: conceptual, logical, physical design. We talked about text alignment, the storytelling, the icon sizes, the relationship between the boxes. How do you color coding certain things? How do you want to think about the elements inside the diagram? We talked about the fonts, the size of the text. How do you, when to use a dotted arrow, when to use a straight arrow? Like, all these things matters. All these things are basically the techniques that you want to take under consideration as you are as you are doing this. So I hope that was useful. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do more of these. There's a lot more techniques that we could cover when it comes to these type of diagrams. So thank you everyone for watching, and I'm going to see you next time. Peace.